Human development. One thing that humans seem to do well is reproduce. Humans are the most numerous mammal on the planet. 137 million births occur every year, with only 56 million deaths. Our population is blooming and is edging closer to 7 billion. It wasn't always this way, of course. Agricultural developments, the advent of the Industrial Revolution, and advances in medicine have all contributed to preventing nature from scaling back our biotic potentials. In this section of the course, we look at the process of fertilization, fetal development, and birth for the most dominant organism on the planet. Prenatal development is divided into trimesters, 3 periods. In this case, 3 3-month periods. The 2 main periods of prenatal development are embryonic, the first 8 weeks, and fetal, from the 9th week to birth. Embryonic development sees a specialization of cells as they become tissues and structures that are all but fully developed by the 8th week. Fetal development sees mainly growth and maturation of organ systems. Critical periods. As this image shows, many systems are past the critical period stage of development during the first 8 weeks. It's worth remembering that many women don't even know they're pregnant at this point and may be going about engaging in lifestyle choices that can harm the developing embryo and not be aware of it. And once she does become aware, the critical period for many important organs and organ systems have passed. Any damage done has already been done and cannot be undone. We'll talk more about this when we discuss teratogens and prenatal development later in this chapter. Within about 12 hours of the sperm entering the egg, the nuclear membranes of the egg and sperm disappear. The fertilized egg is now called a zygote, from a Greek word meaning joined. Fertilization, conception, the start of human development. When does life start? Well, there are several schools of thought. Legally, it's a birth. Many scientists argue it's the point of when the fertilized egg implants in the uterus. Alberta Education's position is that it occurs at fertilization. Male and female gametes fuse to form a diploid cell with 46 chromosomes. Fertilization combines the haploid sex cells so that the result is one cell with 22 homologous pairs of chromosomes and 2 sex chromosomes. Fertilization occurs in the oviducts proximal to the ovaries. The acrosome enzymes of several sperm digest the ovum's outer layer. Several dozen sperm cells have made it to this point. Millions have died along the way while battling the acid environment of the female reproductive system. Some sperm cells have deformities preventing proper motility and are quickly destroyed by her immune system. Some sperm cells prematurely release their acrosome enzymes into the first thing they come across that faintly resembles an egg, rendering them useless. Half of what's left follow the mucous channels into the wrong oviduct. One sperm, though, enters the ovum, causing the ovum's outer membrane to become impermeable to any other sperm. The egg's plasma membrane depolarizes once the sperm gets in, preventing any more sperm from entering, a mechanism that is not fully understood in mammals but is known to involve the release of calcium ions from vesicles within the ovum, increasing the cytoplasmic calcium ion concentrations. Polyspermy is when 2 or more sperm cells enter the egg. Since this creates an egg with a greater number of chromosomes than normal, it results in an unviable egg. The fertilized ovum is now called a zygote. After about 30 hours following fertilization, the first meiotic division occurs. After several days and once in the uterus, the ball of cells begin to fill with fluid diffused from the uterus. This results in the formation of 2 groups of cells in a structure now called a blastocyst. The outer group of cells will develop into the placenta. The inner group of cells will ultimately become the embryo. After almost 2 weeks, the outer cells secrete enzymes that digest some of the tissues of the endometrium, causing the blastocyst to sink into it, implantation. The outer layer of cells also secrete a hormone, human chorionic gonadotropic hormone, to maintain the corpus luteum during the first trimester that would otherwise degenerate, so that it will keep producing estrogen and progesterone to maintain the endometrium. After the first trimester, the placenta would secrete sufficient amounts of estrogen and progesterone to keep the endometrium intact. So to summarize, cleavage and implantation. Cleavage involves the first few rounds of mitotic divisions while in the oviduct. The blastocyst stage sees two cell groupings and a fluid-filled space. The outer cell groupings will become the placenta. The inner cells will become the embryo. Endometrial attachment occurs followed by implantation, and the outer cells secrete HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropic hormone. The relative concentrations of hormones during pregnancy are shown here. HCG is produced by the outer layer of cells that will become the placenta. The hormone keeps the corpus luteum functioning during the first half of the pregnancy. The second half of the pregnancy has the placenta producing most of the estrogen and progesterone, since these cells are now mature enough and plentiful enough to produce the large amounts required to sustain the endometrium. Gastrulation. A space forms between the inner and outer layers of cells called the amniotic cavity and soon fills with fluid. The membrane enclosure is the amniotic sac. The inner cell mass flattens to a disc called the embryonic disc. Initially, two layers of cells, the endoderm and the ectoderm, a third layer forms in between called the mesoderm. Gastrulation makes up these three primary layers, endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm. Morphogenesis is a series of events that form the distinct structures of the embryo. It occurs because the cells begin to differentiate. Cells that take a specific form and function that relate to its position in relation to other cells. The yolk sac is not analogous to a chicken egg's yolk, but contributes to the formation of the primary digestive tract, red blood cell production, and the first sex cells. So to summarize, gastrulation occurs during implantation. The amniotic cavity begins to develop. It develops from a space between the inner and outer cells. It will fill with fluid, amniotic fluid, and be enclosed in a membrane, the amniotic sac. The embryo will end up developing inside it. The inner cell mass flattens to form the embryonic disc, which forms the three primary layers. The embryonic disc is connected to the endometrium by a short stalk. Initially, two layers of cells, a third layer forms in between. These three primary layers mark the start of morphogenesis, the formation of distinct structures. The three primary layers form the endoderm, and that'll form the linings of the digestive and respiratory systems and endocrine glands. A more complete list is on figure 15.7 in your text, but what's written here is all you really need to know. The ectoderm, which will form the skin and nervous system, and the mesoderm, which will form the skeleton, muscles, and reproductive organs. Differentiation is where cells develop form and function specific to where they are in relation to other cells. The process of morphogenesis occurs because cells begin to differentiate, taking on a form and function that is specific to their location within the embryonic structure. This is done by the intercellular communication that exists via intercellular chemical messengers. So morphogenesis then is the formation of distinct structures, for example, the formation of the three primary layers. Neurulation. The development of what will become the spinal cord occurs during a process called neurulation. It occurs between the 3rd and 8th week of embryonic development. And in image C, the two folds come together as they should normally. Now, if the neural tube doesn't develop properly and these folds don't connect, spina bifida can develop and the spinal cord can be exposed to the outside as it develops. This is less of an issue if the fetus stays in the uterus, but at birth, when the exposed spinal cord gets access to oxygen in the air, there will be significant physical and neurological impairment. In utero surgery has proven very useful in reducing this impairment. There is no general consensus on what causes spina bifida, but folic acid or vitamin B9 supplements prior to conception has reduced the incidence of this condition by 75%. However, by the time a woman realizes she's pregnant, the folic acid she thinks she should be taking will be in vain. This condition will have occurred and cannot be undone. Unless advised otherwise by a physician, women of reproductive age should be consuming supplementary folic acid, especially if she goes tanning, because UV radiation breaks down your body's own vitamin B9.